Listen, I was left with the overwhelming impression that Andrew Costa is a very, very expert communicator, but he's also a process man and an extraordinarily mediocre in the sense of not being definite leader. The big revelation from yesterday's interview, and it's been picked up obviously by the media this morning, is that he'd briefed Chris Hipkins, the previous Minister of Police, and current Police Minister Mark Mitchell, as to the McSkimming affair. But in actual fact, if you listened to the interview, no, he hadn't. And this is where I get worried about the mainstream media these days, and particularly young people, under the age of 40, trying to run political statements when your entire life has been looking at a phone, so you don't actually understand human nature. There was no file note to suggest that he had. There was no that he could produce. There was no memo to say, here you go. There was no written record, and there was no witness, Josh. Now, let me just go through this again, right, Josh? No file note, no memorandum, no written record, and no witness to this alleged briefing that Costa had given to both Hipkins and to Mitchell,
both in the back of a car,
about the McSkimming affair. Now, seriously, Josh, does that sound like a briefing to you?
No.
It doesn't sound like a briefing to me, does
Sounds
it?
like a casual conversation in the back of a car to me. But,
Funny enough, you should say that. On his own admission, he vaguely mentions something to Chris Hipkins in the back of a car on a trip around Kaikoura. I'm sorry, Costa, that's not a briefing. And can I say to all the other mainstream media, Josh, if you had a conversation, I'm looking out there thinking, God, Jacinda's just about to resign. Do I really want to be Prime Minister? It's in front of my brain. And Costa says, oh, by the way, McSkimming's in a bit of trouble. Yeah. Do you really? Is that a briefing, Josh? No, seriously.
No, not at all.
So I exonerate completely current opposition and Labour leader Chris Hipkins, and very much Mark Mitchell as well, because there's no record and no one can back Costa up. And then I suddenly realised I'm listening to a liar, Josh. And when
yes.
the fascinating part of watching that conversation yesterday, and I've come to this independently, was, wait on, mate, if you were going to take something as seriously as this serious, and you were given and you'd taken it seriously enough to say, oh, by the way, Deputy Police Commissioner Jevon McSkimmings is under investigation or for allegedly misusing and abusing a relationship with a woman half his age, that's fine. You're allowed to have sex with women half your age, but then gets said woman employed in the police and moves her closer to him. Josh, don't you think at that stage you'd be going, I think I'd better put this into some sort of formal setting? No,
you'd think
he
so.
doesn't. All right. Then he disputed, and this is the other reason I realised I was listening to a liar last night. Oh, yes, last night, obviously yesterday morning. In terms of influencing them at skimming investigation, Jack Tame rightly pulled him up. Well, how come 5 other people sitting in the same meeting that you did got an impression, and they gave that impression to the IPCA and you didn't? And then it was about the protocol, re-intercepting emails in Mitchell's office, which we've now seen written proof that there was a protocol and it came straight out of Costa's office. Now, the man is one of either two things, incompetent or a liar, or potentially both, incompetent and a liar. But I would suggest to you, I'm leaning towards the latter observation. And the other thing I also noticed, and for those of you who would have picked it up, he wanted Jevon McSkimming, as commissioner. He admitted that on the interview. He wanted Jevon McSkimming as the police commissioner to replace him. It was his personal preference. And I would suggest to you that a man who thinks that I want Jevon McSkimming to replace me as the police commissioner, when he was asked why, basically he said, I'm paraphrasing it now, because he thought roughly like me. I knew essentially that the changes I'd put in place would be preserved and enhanced. He didn't want Chambers, and he made that bloody obvious in the interview last night. He obviously thought that what he'd tried to achieve would be undone by some bloody ploddy cop who in actual fact did just ploddy police work, where he could have Jevon McSkimming, and brilliant, a young mind apparently, who has affairs all over the shop, and has a wonderful private life on a police computer. Yeah. Can I just say, at that point you realise that Costa had done this interview on Q&A for the point and purpose of resurrecting. It was sort of like, it wasn't quite as bad as the Prince Andrew car crash interview, but gee, it approximated it. Because if you, and Tame was Tame. Tame is the worst interviewer I've ever seen Television New Zealand come up with. Ever. He's got the hard questions in front of him. Somebody's given them to him and written it down. He just doesn't know how to pursue them. He's Tame by name, Tame by nature, as you know. But there was McSkimming admitting that he was determined, Costa admitting that he was determined that McSkimming take over from him. It coloured every judgment that he made. And he got that admission, Tame, and didn't go anywhere or do anything with it. It was extraordinary, really. And suddenly you realised you were dealing with a liar. So for those of you who haven't watched the interview, it was about 50 minutes in the end of it, and fair enough for Q&A devoting all that attention to it. After all, it's been the story of the year at the end of the day. You realise that Andrew Costa is a liar. It isn't just the IPCA that have called him out for lying. It isn't just the current police minister, Mark Mitchell. It isn't just the former police minister, Chris Hipkins. It isn't just the deputy state services commissioner, Baggett. It isn't just all of them. It's obvious if you listen to the interview that he is covering up and seeking to make light of all of the shocking decisions that he made to protect his mate. And it wasn't so much to protect his mate in actual fact. The real thing that came out of yesterday's interview was this. Andrew Costa was out to preserve his legacy. It wasn't really about Jevon McSkimming. It was about him. Of course it was. He was out to try and entrench the ideological and systemic changes that he had made at the New Zealand Police that were all so crappy and useless and obviously wrong, but he wanted to preserve his legacy, and he saw the deeply flawed McSkimming as the way and the path and the route to do so. So for those of you who haven't watched the interview, there's my take of it. And it was clearly obvious, sitting out there like dog's bollocks, can I have to say, to use a particular phrase, and Tame didn't follow it up. He didn't realise that what was unfolding in front of him was the unravelling of the argument, the unravelling of the justification of Costa in front of him. And I was just going, ask the effing question, screaming at the screen. But no, Tame's Tame after all.